you think you could never be vegan, you're in the right place. And if you think there's something big that you would really like to do, but it's probably too late, you're in the right place. My name is Michelle Olander. I'm a life coach, and I think there has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. So I'm here every single week to cheer you on and offer some actionable tips as you veg your best. Episode 138, my top vegan travel tip. Guess who's back? Guess who's back, my Veg Your Bestie? I'm back. And after 10 jam-packed days in Spain with all 3 of our kids, their spouses, and 4 grandchildren 3 years and under, when you hear this, I will be back in the Veg Your Best bunker, my underground home office, which is really in need of some organization after preparing taxes and running out of here on April 11th or 12th or whenever it was. So there's paper everywhere. If you hear things rustling or falling off the desk, that's what it is. And if you get the weekly V-mail, that's our newsletter that we send out every Thursday. And by the way, if you don't have the weekly V-mail coming to your inbox, why not? Why not? It will keep you up to date with the podcast episodes and links to some of the subjects and the people we talk about on the pod, and also a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. And you can always find the link in the episode notes to get V-mail from Veg Your Best or follow the link tree under my bio on Instagram. Anyway, but that's the tangent. If you did get the weekly V-mail, if you do get it, you may have read this week that I have one more tip to add to last week's guest. Ms. Worldwide Bridie reads 9 tips for vegan travel anywhere. And as I've said in the podcast, Bridie's first tip was, of course, the one I think is of supreme importance, and that so many of us kind of poo-poo. We say, yeah, Michelle, I know, attitude, mindset, whatever. But what I need, Michelle, are the specific action steps. I need the perfect sequence along with the magic words and the secret information and the apps and the recipes and the addresses that will make being vegan easier or make being a vegan on the road in unfamiliar locales more enjoyable. And that's what I hear from so many people, that they want the how. They don't want to spend time on mindset. But there's nothing more essential to being either an effective human in general or a positive vegan in particular. There's nothing more important than your mindset, than your attitude, your mental approach. That's the lens that Bridie talks about. She said, if you look through a lens of lack or a lens of abundance, that is what you'll see. If you look through a lens of lack or a lens of abundance, that is what you'll see. So without deliberately working on your mindset, on your attitude, your lens, you will not be able to find and use and commit to the tools and actions and tips that are out there. But with a deliberate mindset, with a positive attitude and a lens of abundance, you will find or even create the actions and the tools that you need. And, okay, mini rant alert. I do occasionally feel this sense of peevishness. I get peeved by influencers and coaches that say things like mindset is just woo-woo. It's just a law of attraction, sit back, chant, let the universe provide, or change the things, or let some world energetic creation happen. Because it's not that can't exist, but that's not at all the way I offer mindset to my clients. It's just not. And I think you heard from Bridie Reed last week from World Vegan Travel. I think you heard that mindset is her number one tip, because if you have a bad attitude or a victim-y attitude or an attitude that says you have no idea, you don't know, you're confused, you're overwhelmed, you're defeated, if you even spend a minute of that feeling of incapable, weak, confused, it's not so much that you manifest those outcomes. It's just that you do block your own capabilities. That lens of lack blocks your ability to focus on solutions. You block your creativity, your intellectual flexibility that helps you find and create the outcome that you want. And it also blocks your ability to find that gift in the mess. It blocks your ability to reorient or redirect a situation that's moving in a way that you don't want. So, if the lens you have has got you viewing the complications in front of you, and as vegans in the world, new vegans, even veteran vegans, if you view the complications that will inevitably be in front of you, well, not just as vegans, but as anybody who's trying to create or build or do something different, if you look at complications and find them evidence that this is pointless, or you find it as evidence that this probably can't be done, and if it can be done, not by you because it's too late and you don't have it in you and you've never been lucky, or vegan practices like this are impossible or unsustainable or isolating, well then there you are. But if you can practice, even very imperfectly, if you can practice seeing some of those complications in front of you as simply the complications that face all of us human beings while we are alive, it is easier to keep bringing yourself back to what is possible, bringing yourself back to what you can do. And that lens is just a deliberate practice of thinking rather than letting thoughts just happen to you. Now, I totally get that this practice can be a hard sell when you are kind of used to seeing yourself as not getting what you want or getting less than everyone else, or when you see yourself as having maybe less support or having been set up with fewer opportunities and structurally having been placed in a marginalized situation due to where you were brought up, how you were brought up, what challenges institutionally are facing you. But honestly, most of the people who have so much facing them harder than the average human being that listens to this podcast, most of those people are doing amazing things. Amazing things. So for those of us who have some of the more garden variety challenges, I want to encourage us all, especially when we don't feel like it, to make an intentional redirection of our focus. Now, of course, if you are dealing with an injury or an illness or a family member who requires tremendous amounts of care, if you're dealing with a financial setback, a career problem that's taking up a lot of your bandwidth, and I can totally relate to having had most... Okay, let me look at that list. Let me think. I guess I've had all those concerns at one time or another. And I will likely face many of those issues again in the future. And the question is, how would I rather think about it? How would you rather think about it when things are hard? Would you rather think that the world is against you and it's too hard, too little, and too late? Or would you maybe want to try on the thought that actually this is why human beings evolved a prefrontal problem-solving brain? And the good news / bad news is that now it's our turn to use it. Maybe it's time to use that prefrontal cortex, not the part of the brain that just runs on autopilot and does 90+% the same thing today as it did yesterday, and will encourage you to repeat all those automatic thoughts, all those automatic feelings and actions again tomorrow. And those thoughts, feelings, and actions will create more or less the same results again tomorrow, unless you throw a deliberate new thought or 2 or 10 into that processing program. And, it's not that it's really difficult to insert deliberate new thoughts into your brain, but it does require a certain amount of diligence. It requires a certain amount of willingness to stop, to interrupt ourselves when we are running our default program, which is, interrupting ourselves, that's less practice. That's less comfortable than just letting the old patterns, the old programs run uninterrupted. But that ability to deliberately choose to think something else, that ability to deliberately choose to look for something else, to intentionally imagine, to visualize another reality or a different way, that is what makes humans so inventive and resilient. Maybe you remember Professor Massimo Pigliucci talking about just that a few weeks ago on episode 135, and it was towards the end of our conversation. And if you were someone who, like I, was brought up eating animal products, and in turn brought my own children up eating animal products with an eye turned away from the mechanisms that bring meat, dairy, fish, and eggs to our tables, mechanisms that almost none of us would willingly watch, then you, like I, were probably practicing thoughts like, well, I know I don't like it, but that's actually just how it is. That's how humans have eaten animals for millennia. That process, eating animals, that just belongs to our cultural traditions. And another previous guest, Melanie Joy, I have had some amazing guests over these last few months. Melanie Joy, PhD, says those 3 ends of justification, that animal products are just normal, natural, and necessary. The 3 ends, normal, natural, and necessary. Those are, for most of us, the default thoughts that we have practiced and repeated and have coalesced our feelings and behaviors around for years, for decades. So to take different actions, to create a vegan or a plant-based practice, we need to make another practice of interrupting those default thoughts regularly, deliberately, and intentionally. And of course that can be done on your own, and maybe sometimes it even works instantly. But if it worked for a while for you and then fell apart, or if you have struggled with it, well, if you've struggled with any behavior change, it's simply because your default thinking keeps happening to you and you're not thinking deliberately. Now, this in a nutshell, is exactly why I think that going vegan, even just moving in that direction, is the perfect opportunity. I think it's the perfect opportunity for any of us who have our reasons to stop eating animals, whether they're ethical, health reasons, environmental, sustainability reasons. It is the perfect opportunity to practice that mindset work. That tip number 1 from Bridie Reed's last week's 9 tips to travel anywhere as a vegan, because the skills you develop moving from someone who unconsciously, routinely eats meats, eggs, dairy, to someone who does not, the skills you develop will serve you in every single other area of your life. And I know for me, they are skills that helped me deal with the confusion and heartbreak around my mother's final illness. They helped me, in the 3 years afterwards, dealing with many of the details of her death. They were skills I learned going vegan that were so helpful to me when I experienced health and physical challenges, and helped me see those challenges as opportunities, and have helped me myself become a more public person and create this business and podcast out of really nothing, with the express aim of helping you, my Vedge bestie, and helping anyone who right now might think that going vegan is impossible, or that something else is just not in the cards for them. Believe me, we all thought it was impossible. We all thought there was a reason we wouldn't be able to stop eating animals. And believe me, it isn't the recipes or the faux meats or the meal plans or the community or the family support that really makes the difference between who goes vegan and who doesn't. And I'm not saying that none of it matters, but what makes it really possible for one person and not another is the mindset. It's the mindset to actually value and honor and understand, yes, these mental challenges are there and they affect our process as we are trying to limit and eliminate animal products. The mindset that regularly reminds you to keep going, even imperfectly, to embrace your own responsibility and to learn from problems and failure. That's mindset. Did you hear that? If your brain wandered away for a second, the thing that makes a difference between one person going plant-based or vegan is the same for every big challenge that you might be undertaking. And it comes down to just 4 steps. The 4 steps of mindfulness, the way I teach it for most of my clients, is 1, valuing the process, not only the result. 2, keeping going even imperfectly. 3, focusing on your responsibility rather than getting distracted with blaming others. And 4, learning from every single mistake or setback. You're either learning or you're winning. Those are my 4 points about mindset. And this is all mindset. No chanting, no mala beads unless you like them. And meditating, no downside at all. But if it's not how you roll, we just work on creating a program of thinking on purpose. The people who really have trouble are the ones who just aren't ready to practice those steps. They think that it should just happen. It should just be natural, or they're not set up for it. And I mean practice. I don't mean that you hit those skills out of the park the first day or the week or even the first year. I mean practice. And there is a whole method that I use with Vedge Best that works to help you limit and eliminate the consumption of animal products. And it's the same process. If you're already vegan or plant-based, it's the same process that helps you take on your next big goal. And what I think makes a coach so helpful is that a coach can help you see when your default thoughts are actually thoughts. when they're actually thoughts and not incontrovertible universal facts. You know, I know once upon a time I believed that having our family Polish Christmas Eve vegan for me would be literally impossible. And I used to think that travel, you know, especially to maybe a small village where there was a culture of dairy and meat or fishing, sometimes occupations that were UNESCO protected designations, I used to think that it would be unacceptable and hence impossible for me to refuse to eat or buy those products. I used to think that it would be uncomfortable and annoying and essentially impossible for my family to eat and travel with me if I didn't eat what was basically on the menu. And you know what? I just got back from Spain with a family of 6 kids, 4 grandkids, and it wasn't always simple, and it didn't always work out perfectly, but it also wasn't impossible. And you know what? Even if you're not there, even when I wasn't there, fully committed, why would you give up on 80 or 90% of your goal, 80 or 90% of being plant-based or being in compliance with a vegan ideal? Why would you give up on 80 or 90% of that practice just because you can't quite make 100% happen yet? So Bridie Reed's number 1 of 9 tips for vegan travel anywhere was mindset. And I think that is so right. Just right. I think mindset is number 1 with any new endeavor. And it is why I do this podcast and why I coach people, because most of us, me included, have no idea how much we're capable of until we examine that narrative, that programming that is running unconsciously under our actions, and hence creating our results. But to get to the end, I have one other tip that I think is super helpful, and that is a sense of humor. A sense of humor. We talked with vegan stand-up comic Stephen Marcus Rellyford recently, and I think it was, okay, let me look here. Yeah, April 11th, episode 136, vegan stand-up comic Stephen Marcus Rellyford, and I asked Marcus, whose business is comedy, why vegans have such a bad rap for being humorless. And, you know, I think it's partially because many, actually maybe all of the main reasons that we want to move away from animal consumption, many, if not all of those reasons are pretty serious. They're pretty serious reasons. Industrial animal agriculture, ethics, human health, environmental pollution and degradation, the impact on world hunger and on climate change. Those are not what most of us would say are frivolous, funny reasons. But people are funny. People are funny. We are funny. Sometimes funny, ha-ha. Sometimes funny, very weird. And when we, as new vegans, or even as veteran vegans or plant-based folks, when we are making our choices in this world and interacting with, 8+ billion other people who are each on their own journey, each thinking their own thoughts, each running their own narratives, sometimes, and by sometimes I mean a lot, sometimes things can go a little pear-shaped. Sometimes things go in a direction that we didn't intend, we didn't want, we don't like. And if possible, my tip number 10, if I'm allowed to add to Bridie Reed's top 9 tips for vegan travel anywhere, my tip is cultivating a sense of humor. A decision to purposefully, a decision to purposefully look for what is funny, to look for what is surreal or wacky or absurd, or that will just make a good story someday, if not exactly right this second. I've talked about it here before, and episode 138, I think we're on. Some of these stories reappear, right? But you may know my father was a child refugee. He was a homeless, stateless child in the Second World War, and he experienced difficult things, of course, including hunger, including fear. But he told me that it is where he and his mother used to try and diffuse tense situations by trying to come up with the way they would tell my grandfather what had happened when, and that was a big if, when or if they saw him again. Because they knew that after years of fighting and not knowing where his wife and child were, and all the deprivation, all the fear, all the death, that they would want to laugh. After all that time apart, they would want to spend their time laughing. My dad said they used to play this game, which the way I remember him calling it, someday this will all seem funny. And I think that many of us could use that intentional habit, that practice. A practice to diffuse some of those tense situations we run into as we practice our lives, maybe as vegans or in some other way that goes against the grain of the majority and often requires us to collaborate with people who don't actually like or certainly don't understand our choices. Now, this past week, I had the following situation in Sevilla, in the south of Spain, and we were having dinner in a restaurant where we had already told the manager that there was one vegan diner, and having been assured that no, there's no problem whatsoever. And, one of the things I do in any new restaurant, sometimes even any restaurant, is before anyone orders, I usually tell the waiter, listen, I'm vegan and I might need your help ordering so that I don't accidentally order something that has meat, fish, eggs, or dairy in it. So I did that early in case the waiter needs to go into the kitchen and ask or check with the manager or whatever. And usually that works pretty well. And in this case, the waiter seemed right on board, and he listened, and he said the Spanish equivalent of no problem. And he took the drinks order, and after bringing the drinks, he told me what they told him in the kitchen they could make for me. And he suggested a gazpacho and a grilled veggie plate and rice. Okay, perfect, great, muy bien, fantástico. So a few minutes later, we all do our orders, and at my turn, I ask for the salmorejo, which is a gazpacho, which most of us know, a gazpacho, a lukewarm or cold soup with bread added. So, and then that's all whizzed up, and it has a different look, a different consistency. So I say, I'll start with a salmorejo. That is vegan, right? And the busy waiter, yes, it was a busy night. The waiter kind of pulls himself up a bit dramatically and says with what seemed to me a little aggravation, Señora, salmorejo. Only, and now as he says only, he picks up his hand and he counts onto his fingers. Only tomato, garlic, bread, olive oil, and salt. Perfect. Gracias. And then it arrives with hard-boiled eggs and ham in it. Now, not on top as the traditional garnish that I could immediately see and send back, but inside the soup, almost as if it had been stirred into the salmorejo. Inside, so that when I take a couple of spoonsful, I think, oh, did they put mushrooms? Are those mushrooms in them? They're kind of smooth, and then I get this confusing mouthful of egg and chorizo. egg and chorizo. Now, I could have decided at that moment that this was more than a microaggression. I could have decided this was going to ruin my meal, my evening with my family and a couple grandchildren on this Spanish adventure we were all taking together. I could have decided that this culture was impossible, that the waiter was a jerk. I could have decided that Spanish food was impossible and the rest of the meals were going to be painful and pointless, and that all the naysayers who told me it was not possible to be vegan in that part of Spain, unless you eat in 100% vegan places. I could have decided any of those thoughts. I could have. But there was something so absurd. And after years of cultivating this practice of looking for the funny, I could see that there was something kind of funny about having been so clear and getting information and being super polite and trying to, do an end run around any problems, and then having gotten a mouthful of hard-boiled egg and chorizo after, 8 years of not eating any of that stuff. We want to create a deliberate thinking practice so that thinking doesn't happen to us, right? Have you heard it said that way? We want to create a deliberate thinking practice so that thinking doesn't happen to us. So my tip number 10, to add to the 9 tips for vegan travel anywhere shared last week on the pod by Bridie Reed from World Vegan Travel, my tip number 10 is whenever possible, imagine that someday we will all be able to laugh about it. Okay. Of course, we can come up with the scenarios that not every part of it is funny, right? And we may not always be able to do it. All aspects of it may not be funny, but for sure, we can always tell any story by emphasizing the cruelty, the rudeness, the callousness, the cluelessness, whatever. That's always possible. I can always tell you a story where I've been wronged. And in this case, it wouldn't help me. It wouldn't help me do what I want to do or enjoy being with my family or learning about the culture where I was. It wouldn't help me make more effective choices at the next place. It wouldn't help me show up here for you, my Vedge bestie. It wouldn't help me encourage you to look at the challenges ahead on your vegan journey. It wouldn't help me encourage you to look at the challenges ahead on your vegan journey as challenges that will give you a richer life. So tip number 10, whenever you can, think to yourself, can I tell this story in a way that makes me stronger and happier and more excited about life? We're not helping the animals, the earth, or our health even by being miserable or feeling disrespected and marginalized. Anytime we have the opportunity to choose a path, anytime we have the opportunity to make a choice for reasons we love, that is a privilege that most of our ancestors and many of our contemporaries on this planet do not have a lot of access to. The choice to live the way we want. We don't want to waste that time. We don't want to waste those choices. So when we are exercising those choices, let's celebrate them. Even when it doesn't go quite the way we want. We're winning or we're learning. Okay, that's enough for today. Quick recap, Bridie's top tip for vegan travel is mindset. And the way I teach mindset, in case you missed it earlier, is typically that 4-part formula. 1, valuing the process of whatever you're trying to achieve, whether it's veganism, plant-based eating, or anything else. Valuing the process, not just the result. 2, keeping going, even imperfectly. 3, focusing on your responsibility. Not getting distracted with blame for others, tempting as that can be. And 4, learning from every mistake or setback. You're learning or you're winning. And as I said, I want to add number 10 to Bridie's 9 fabulous tips, deliberately cultivating and choosing a sense of humor whenever possible. Okay, my Veg Your Bestie, that's it for this week. More vegan travel thoughts next week. We're going to be talking to Rebecca from Veggies Abroad. And if you're looking for a coach, it would be my honor to help you realize your next big goal. And it just starts with a free discovery call, a consultation where we get you started and then you decide how I can support you. And until next week, get out there and veg your best. Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.